answers. Please like, share, all that good stuff, so people can find this video and be able to ask questions and so on. Just one important issue I want to raise at the start is the issue of the Iceland workers. People might have seen, I might even have spoken about the Iceland workers in one of these updates in the last while. Basically, the Iceland stores in Ireland were part of the kind of the UK group. The Iceland stores were sold to a company, and since then the workers have been treating really abysmally. They haven't got wages paid. They've turned off the air conditioning in the shops. Just the workers have been treated really horribly for months, and they've been getting organised. They've been joining the Independent Workers Union. Then last week the company went into examinership in what certainly has many hallmarks of what's known as a tactical insolvency. So the company said, we have a huge amount of debts, we have to go into an examinership, we're insolvent. The debts, there's 36 million euros worth of debts, but 34 million of those debts are to the parent company, i.e. effectively to themselves. So it looks like a situation like Debenhams, whereby this is a kind of manufactured, created insolvency, quite possibly in order to screw over the workers. So workers have been left without wages again, without holiday pay, and very courageously, workers, predominantly women workers in Talbot Street, the Iceland store in Talbot Street, occupied 2 days ago their store and have stayed in it since. And I went down with Breed Smith, with Richard Boyd Barrett, and other PBP activists, including Bernard Mulvaney, yesterday to meet with them. Very heroic women who are taking this action, and they're very determined. They're saying, we're not going to leave until we get what we're owed. Between them, they reckon that they're owed tens of thousands of euros in unpaid wages and unpaid holiday pay. I raised this yesterday in the Dáil, and Varadkar said, well, of course they should get what they're owed. They should go through the WRC, which is this long bureaucratic process. Whereas, when we were chatting about this with the workers, if you go into Iceland and you steal a frozen pizza, they can call the Gardaí on you, and the Gardaí can arrest you. Whereas in this country, unfortunately, wage theft isn't treated as a crime in the same way. And instead, people have to go through this lengthy process. There's a very small number of labour inspectors across the country, so this is a thing that needs to be urgently dealt with. But in the meantime, the workers are absolutely correct to occupy and to say, we want what we're owed. And People Before Profit supports them 100%. There is a rally today at 7 o'clock in front of the store organised by the union, the Independent Workers Union. So anyone who's around, try and come down and support the protest, support the workers. 7 o'clock at the Iceland store on Talbot Street. The other thing I wanted to talk about, definitely can't allow this week to go by, it's a dominant item in the news, what everyone is talking about is the revelations we're seeing in terms of RTE. Sorry, we got a comment, who cares about Iceland? Ireland needs to increase defence spending. We had this last week, people getting confused between the country Iceland and the store Iceland, and the fact that these are workers in Ireland who are being treated really horribly by this company. Got a message here on Instagram from TU Dublin Students' Union saying that they published their cost of living guide, and they suggest students pay an average 363 a month in rent. Find it hard to find any students that pay that little. That sounds remarkably low considering the price of rents across the country. That seems really bizarre. I'll check that out, because that's wildly out of whack with what, for example, was published by UCD Students' Union just a couple of weeks ago. Secondly, someone wants to talk about NATO. I will talk about NATO in a minute. Secondly, though, I want to talk about the whole Ryan Tubridy controversy. I presume people have seen this. It's pretty scandalous what's been taking place. Effectively, the bits that we know, and as much that we don't know yet, but we know that Ryan Tubridy, who was getting close to 500,000 euros in official salary that was published, they have to publish the top earners over the last number of years. But in addition to that, he was getting a secret payment of 75,000 euros a year, which was not declared in that register that was published every year. Completely hidden payment. And the way that they were paying it is that they were using for 1 year, 2020, they got Renault was the sponsor of the Late Late Show, and they said to Renault, okay, we want you to give €75,000 to Ryan Tubridy, but don't worry, it's not actually going to cost you anything, because in exchange for that €75,000, we're going to give you a credit note for €75,000 of free advertising with RTE. And then Renault actually benefited from the deal, because they not only got the credit note, they paid €75,000 directly to Tubridy, they got €75,000 in free advertising from RTE as a consequence. And then RTE paid for the €30,000 or €40,000 worth of money to pay for the organisation of the 3 events that Ryan Tubridy did with Renault. So effectively the money was kind of laundered through Renault in order to conceal this payment from the public. Absolutely scandalous. The idea kind of that Ryan Tubridy in his first statement, he kind of claimed he couldn't have known anything about this one. Obviously, year after year, his published salary comes out and it's less than what he's getting. He obviously should have known something was going on. That was that first year. Renault, the money went through Renault. After that, the money didn't go through Renault. It just was paid directly by RTE through this barter account to Ryan Tubridy, but wasn't declared. The statement which came out from RTE yesterday basically said the only one who knew anything about this is Dee Forbes, the former boss of RTE, basically, who is gone. She's resigned. She's not coming into the Dáil to answer any questions, and like nobody else knows anything about it, which is all far too convenient. So it's really horrendous. It's horrendous in the context of the cost of living crisis that ordinary workers are experiencing, and then we're paying extra money, secret money, to someone who's already extremely well paid, overpaid, I would argue. It's horrendous in the context of the treatment of ordinary workers in RTE, including journalists at RTE. Sally Hayden, who's a journalist, was pointing out the fact that if you produce like kind of an audio segment for one of RTE's programs, they give you €120. So hours and hours of research, audio work, production and so on goes into that. They give you €120. RTE is engaged in, or certainly seems to be engaged in, the practice of bogus self-employment, whereby workers' rights are kind of circumvented by saying workers are self-employed as opposed to being ordinary workers. There's a question come in on TikTok there about Sacred Heart Kilnarden. Will it be getting a special class? I'll check into that. Casey, if you want to send us... So we have checked into that, I'm hearing now. So we've put in a parliamentary question about that. So we'll put the answer online. We'll probably get the answer online next week. We'll get the answer next week. We'll put it online. So if you keep an eye on our social media, hopefully find more information about that. Someone coming in saying, you run our country into the ground. Well, for better or for worse, I don't run the country. We're not in the government, so unfortunate about that. Equal pay for young workers bill, the government voted down, unfortunately, last week. Back to RTE briefly. I mean, what needs to happen? One, they need to come clean about everything that was happening. Like, originally all the stories were like, this is the tip of the iceberg, but now we're being told, no, Ryan Tubridy is the only one who's affected. Was the this barter account used to pay other people? Is there a pattern in terms of, he's represented by this agent called Noel Kelly? There's a high proportion of guests on the Late Late Show who are also represented by Noel Kelly. Was there any sort of improper interference there? There's a whole number of questions that need to be answered that aren't being answered at the moment by RTE, so you need a full external investigation into it. It also draws like attention to the basic point that there should be a pay cap. Nobody needs to be paid €500,000. That's absolutely ridiculous. Like, the same thing is attempting to happen at the moment for the CEOs of semi-state companies and for the very top civil servants, people on €200,000, €300,000. There's a report come out which basically they're going to try and use it to significantly have big increases for the people who are already on big money, and there should be a pay cap. Someone says you're speculating, you don't know what went on. Well, in terms of, the thing about Renault and the €75,000, we know that's published as part of the report. We know that RTE then paid €75,000 through the barter account through that. We know that RTE paid for the events organised by Renault. So we know a lot, and we know what went on was definitely not right. Absolutely, pay cap for useless TDs. Forget about useless TDs, all TDs, most of which are useless. There absolutely should be a pay cap. I take less than the average worker's wage. The rest is all donated to striking workers, to community campaigns, and so on. And that's the case for all people for-profit TDs, take the average worker's wage or less. But we think all TDs should be on that. It's something we've raised repeatedly in the Dáil. Do you not think our neutrality is more important to be in the headlines? I do, absolutely. I think what was and someone earlier on asked me to talk about NATO, which I'm very, very happy to do that. I think you had these consultative forums happen over the end of last week, the start of this week, and I think bluntly they went badly for the government, which is good. I think this exercise at manufacturing consent for moving closer to NATO, for getting rid of neutrality, driving through militarization. It went badly for them because it was punctured by the anti-war protesters being there and highlighting what was the agenda and the biased nature of the forum. The role that we played in the Dáil, I mean, we were the first ones to be saying this is completely biased. Look at the role of the chair. Look at previous comments. Look at who's speaking here. It's 5-1 kind of pro-militarization, anti-neutrality versus defense of neutrality position. And in terms of the intervention of Michael D. Higgins, which I think, and the president, who was had a big important impact on that. Sorry, someone said a woman attacked yesterday. That's terrible, obviously. I hope that's reported to the guards. Everyone feeds on cancel culture, including this guy. Jealousy. I don't understand what that means. I often don't understand when people talk about cancel culture, what exactly they're talking about. I don't know, you're giving out that Ryan Tubridy's been cancelled? That's been commentary like that? I don't think he's been cancelled, he's on 500 grand a year of our money, getting secretly paid and so on. I think it's fair enough that there's consequences if he doesn't get back on it, on RTE. So I think they went badly, the consultative forums for the government. That's good, but I think we shouldn't be complacent. They're still, the report's still going to be the same report. I could have written the report that they're going to write after the forums, before the forum started. And the main thing they're going to go for is the next step. This isn't, they try and present, we're not joining NATO. We're not saying you're trying to join NATO right now. We're saying there's a process towards joining NATO, and the next part of that is getting rid of the triple lock. So the triple lock is something that says, in order to send any significant number of Irish troops abroad, you need 3 things to happen. Decision of the government, decision of the Dáil, and decision of the UN, either the Security Council or General Assembly. And the government wants to get rid of the third aspect of that and say, then we'll have a double lock. The double lock is worth nothing. It's the government. The government has a majority in the Dáil by definition. So, the triple lock is the one thing that prevented previous governments sending troops abroad to support US imperialist adventures, costing the lives of hundreds of thousands or even millions of people in the Middle East. Triple lock prevented that. They were able to allow them to use US military to use Shannon Airport to send more than 3 million troops through Shannon Airport, but they weren't able to send troops abroad because they didn't have a UN security resolution. And this isn't in response to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. That's not what it's about. You can go back 20 years, read a Fine Gael policy document called Beyond Neutrality, which says explicitly the triple lock is a political straitjacket, it ties our hands, we should get rid of it. So they've been wanting to get rid of this forever. Now they think that's a chance to do so. Just dealing with some of the questions. Okay, right. So I think the same guy. So yeah, everyone wants to ruin him as soon as he leaves. Cancel culture, i.e. jealousy. So this is the thing. People talk about cancel culture when there are consequences for people's actions. This guy was getting 75,000 euros extra, under the table, not in a tax sense it seems, but in the sense of not being reported. He knew he was getting that, completely untransparent, and there's consequences to that. In my opinion, it's fair enough that he's not on the air now. That isn't cancel culture. I think it's fair enough there's consequences for people's action. Do you support lowering the voting age? Isn't that coming up in the Dáil this week? So yes, I support lowering the voting age, definitely. We think the voting age should be 16. People can be out at work, paying taxes, getting below the minimum wage, unfortunately, at that age. So yes, we support and campaign for a lowering of the voting age, but no, it's not coming up in the Dáil this week. How do we push for a general election? Good question. Political pressure. We need to build a movement, on the housing crisis in particular. I would say in the cost of living crisis. There's a major protest coming up. We'll have the details. I think it's October 8th, organised by the Cost of Living Coalition. If we had big numbers on the streets, that would have a big impact in terms of putting pressure on the government to go. Get rid of RTE, waste of money. I wouldn't agree with that, actually. Like, I think there's lots of problems with RTE, huge amounts of problems. But I think public service broadcasting is actually important. I don't think it should be funded through a licence fee, which is completely regressive. You know, everyone, regardless of your income, you pay the same. That means a much higher proportion of people on lower incomes, of their incomes, rather than on the wealthy. But I think we should be taxing, for example, the big social media giants, you know, who dominate so much of our kind of public online space, and using that money to have proper independent public service broadcasting. But also we need a real reform of how it's managed, bringing the voice of ordinary workers and the viewing public to the centre of decisions about RTE. Constitutional neutrality push must include a ban on conscription. That's a good idea. We're going to reintroduce our bill, trying to put neutrality into the constitution. Because the government likes to say we want a debate, but they don't want a debate. Like, they want a staged, managed process, and then at the end of that to say, "Oh, we're going to get rid of triple lock, blah blah blah, and bring us closer to NATO." We want a debate, and we want the public to decide. And the best way to do that is through a referendum. If we tax them, I don't know which companies precisely you're talking about. Oh, sorry, the social media companies. Companies will leave, and we'll have no jobs. Well, the tax rate is going up in this country, and they haven't all left. So it suits them to say, you know, because we have to move to this minimum rate of tax under an EU proposal to 15, or it's not an EU, it's an OECD proposal to 15%, and they haven't all left. So it suits them to say, we're going to leave, because they obviously want taxes to be as low as possible, never mind 12.5%, in reality less than 1% for, like, Apple paid for a long time. So we shouldn't believe them, that they're just going to walk like that. But secondly, we should raise a question mark over the sustainability of an economy which is reliant on winning a race to the bottom on tax and on data protection. Because even if there weren't loads of problems with that in and of itself, it's not a race you can win forever. Another country will come along, even lower tax rates, etc. So it isn't a sustainable model. And instead we should be looking at using the kind of big surpluses we have at the moment to move the economy onto a different track. We're obviously socialists. We're in favour of public ownership of the key sections of the economy. I see some people making that point there, exactly. And planning in the interests of ordinary people. And particularly planning for this, mitigation and adaptation in terms of climate change. We should be leading the way in terms of wind energy. We should be leading the way in terms of a semi-state company set up to retrofit people's homes in a very rapid way, and so on. Interesting question, controversial. How do we move away from animal agriculture? Well, I don't think we need to move away from animal agriculture as a whole, although obviously just some campaigners who would argue for that. But I think we need to move away from the industrialised model of animal agriculture that we currently have, which is an unsustainable model. And basically the way we need to do that is that it is true, when farmers say we were incentivised to go into intensive dairy farming. That's true. That was government policy in terms of the way that various subsidies were set up. So we need to redesign subsidies to incentivise different sustainable models of farming which ensure decent living standards for ordinary small farmers, the vast majority who are on extremely low incomes. So we basically need to restructure it like that, and then bring the big agribusiness corporations, the Green Corps, Kerry Group, etc., into public ownership, planning, and so on. Sorry, just reading through the questions. Can PVP play a part in the left-winning power, or are you splitters? Well, we produced a pamphlet recently, which I encourage you to read. Here we go. The case for a left government, getting rid of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which outlines our approach to this and how we want there to be a left government. We want to be a part of a left government. After the next election, if there's a chance to get rid of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, we will be voting for that Taoiseach's nominee. After the last election, we voted for Mary Lou McDonald as Taoiseach in the Dáil. So that's the number one point. We will vote for, if there's a chance for an alternative government, we'll be voting for that government. Secondly, on the question of whether we join that government or not, that depends on the policy. So we would negotiate with Sinn Féin and others to say that this needs to be really transformative government, a government with eco-socialist policies that will actually make people's lives better, which means, for example, a €15 an hour minimum wage. It means taking the big polluting corporations out of private ownership into public ownership, planning them for people's needs in our planet instead of profit, establishing a national health service, including by incorporating the private hospital sector in that, ending any involvement with the US military, NATO, etc. So we'd have certain core policies that are bottom lines for us. If we get agreement on that, and this can be a government that bases itself on people and people power and tries to mobilise that people power to overturn the current unjust capitalist system, then we'd be happy to be part of that government with that kind of strategy in mind. If not, fine. We'll still vote for the government to come to power. We'll still vote for their nominee for Taoiseach. And then any measures that are in line with their manifesto, that meet the aspirations of ordinary people, that are good things, we'll vote for those things. And we would reserve the right to vote against things that go against the ordinary people if people were betrayed. Would you get rid of the farmers? No. Not at all. Farmers, actually, I think in an eco-socialist society, you're going to have a higher proportion of people working in farms because of a shift in the model of farming. Expanding rail service around the country, yeah, very important. I'm sure people have seen there's a map of like the rail lines that used to be in this country where they're then basically torn up. Obviously, it's terrible. You should have rail lines. We don't need to have like internal flights in a country as small as Ireland. We need high quality, high speed rail transport within Ireland. That's a vital part of developing a proper public transport infrastructure. Just looking through a couple of comments now on Instagram. Ben Buckley, his answer to everything is to nationalise it. I think Ben has been watching a video from Gript. Fair play to you. Some investigative journalism discovering that socialists are in favour of public ownership of the key sections of the economy. Yes, we're socialists. This is not news. And I actually think when you have the discussion with people, should we have a private hospital system? Should we have a system whereby people are able to pay for access to better healthcare? Where people like Larry Goodman are making big money out of the health service, they make money because of the inadequacies of our public health system, or should we incorporate that into a public health system and build a national health service? Should we have a situation where the banks are being run for private profit, extraordinary salaries for those at the top, or should the banks not be utilised? Instead of running the economy and society for the banks, we should use the banks as a public utility in the interests of ordinary people. The energy companies. Should the energy companies be run for profit? It makes no sense from a consumer point of view, from a worker point of view, or from the point of view of our environment. We don't hide the fact that we're in favour of the key sections of the economy being in democratic public ownership. I will highlight that CTEC is back and contracted to run JobPath. Alright, I think I'm going to leave it. How does Larry Goodman make money off the health service? Because he owns a bunch of private hospitals, and their profits are up, significantly up. Right, I think I'm going to leave it there for now, because I have to run and do other stuff. But okay, quickly, how much do you earn? So the official TD salary is something like 108 or 109,000 gross now, but I don't take anything like that. So I take my salary is based on the equivalent of a 28,000 euros gross. So whatever that works out as net is what I personally take. I have an account which is my TD account, which isn't my personal account, and then I'm paid out of that into my own personal account of the equivalent of 28,000 gross, whatever. I presume it comes out as 20 something thousand. And we think all TDs should be on the average worker's wage or less. Okay.
I will go. What's our opinion? My opinion, private schools, they're very bad. We shouldn't have private schools. We should stop funding private schools. They get funded twice, and then they would basically come to an end. All right. Good luck. I'll see you next week. Take care.